Hello, book friends. Terri from Terri Talks Books or Ms. Terri B here on YouTube. Welcome. Welcome back to all of my book friends and subscribers. And welcome to all of my new book friends and subscribers. I'm really happy to see you here. And I have appreciated all of the comments. I was happy to see a lot of people leaving comments that have never left comments before. So that was really fun. And I just encourage you to continue to interact because that's part of my why for being here. So anyway, welcome to you all. What am I doing today? Well, normally I'd be doing a wrap up. So I am doing a kind of wrap up of my reading for October. It's a wrap, or is it? Maybe that's what I'll call the thumbnail. It's a wrap, or is it? Because October turned out to be really interesting. And then I'm also going to be talking about my possible reads for November. And I'm just kind of blending these together because that is how my reading is happening, which is actually how I think we all used to read before social media. And we put these parameters, these boundaries on ourselves. This is my reading for October. This is my reading for November. This is, and I have these time schedules to work with. And they're by and large self-imposed. And sometimes it can put a little bit of pressure on us. So I've gotten to the point where if I start to pressure myself, I just back off of that because that's just not useful. And that's not how reading really happens anyway. And I don't want to take the joy out of reading. I really don't want to do that. And I think back often, I'll think back fondly to those days of yore when I used to just go to the library and go, hey, that looks interesting. I think I'll check that out. And I'd take it home and read it and then return it. And there were just no, and unless I was reading something for a class, there were no time restrictions. Sometimes I needed to get something read because it was due at the library. But other than that, I didn't notice whether it was October 31st or November 1st. It didn't matter. Absolutely didn't matter. I could start a book 2 days before the end of a month and then just continue on for the next week reading that same book, and it didn't make any difference. So I think about that every once in a while and think, yeah, don't worry about it if you didn't reach your self-imposed goals. And I say that because I really didn't reach my self-imposed goals. I mean, October just turned out to be quite the month. It was a very busy month. I had some things that were a little bit on the stressful side to deal with. They just took up some emotional energy and left me unable to focus and read sometimes, or found myself sometimes not really wanting to read. I would do other things instead, more active things. And that's fine. That is just fine when that happens. And I just give myself grace for that. That's life. And then there were other things that were just very exciting. I had a birthday. I had a surprise impromptu vacation away for a few days with my husband. And I talked about that in my birthday book haul. And it was just fun. We enjoyed ourselves. I did like a little bit of reading. Seriously, pages. You always think when you go away, it's like, oh, I'm going to cozy up at the coffee house and read, or I'm going to go snuggle up by the fireplace in the lobby and read, or whatever you think you're going to do, and then you don't do it. That doesn't happen. And you come home and you read 4 or 5 pages. I mean, I don't know. Does that happen to you? Let me know in the comments. Happens to me. So I go out with intentions and thinking, oh, perfect, and I won't be distracted by, oh, I need to do this. Oh, I need to do that, and so, yeah, I went hiking instead, so fine, fine. So, there were fun things like that happened. And, it was one of the so-called longer months, 31 days, but it seemed so short to me. And so let me talk about this wrap up, or is it, of October. So what happened? What happened in October? Well, I started out continuing to read In Favor of the Sensitive Man and Other Essays by Anais Nin. I started this for Shorty September, and I am enjoying it very, very much. I'm about halfway through. I'm just reading it very slowly. I rolled it forward from September, thought I'd have it finished, but didn't, and felt no compulsion to read it any faster. And it didn't have to do with enjoyment level. It was just, they're essays. And so I'd read an essay, put it down, come back later, read another essay. So that's apparently the pace I'm going to go at with this. I'll probably have this finished by the end of November, probably, but we'll come back and talk about this in shortly. Then I had an impromptu buddy read with Kate Howe of A Severe Mercy by Sheldon Van Auken. Now, she has finished hers. I believe she finished it. She had an audiobook version checked out from the library, and it got called back, so she had to return it. So I think she just kind of sped up the pace and finished it up. And so we're still kind of talking about this. I am almost done. I have, out of this fairly short book anyway, right? I only have this much left to go. It's about 50 pages, if even that. And so I will be finishing this probably in the next couple of days. I'm not really in any hurry to finish it, but at this point, I think I want to get it finished. This is a reread for me, and I talked about this earlier this year. I do believe it was. I talked about books that have meant 5 books or 8 books or something like that. If I remember, I will link to that video either in the cards, or I will link to the video in the description box, or both, whatever, to that. And you can see what books I picked. But in that video, I didn't really talk about the book that much, the content of the book, because the focus of that video, it was a tag, was, the focus of that was, what was the influence that it had on me? Why is it important to me? And what kind of influence did it have? So I think when I finish this, I will do a separate review of it. I think it would be worth doing that. And I'm not really prepared to talk about it at this point. It is very much a book about grief. And so there's just a lot there. So I think I will come back and do a full review on that. But that, I'm going to mention it again one more time before we go here today. And then here's what I finished in October. I finished Trust by Hernan Diaz. Now, this was for my book club here where I live, my In Real Life book club. And this was, mid-October? So I had to jump on this fairly early in October. And it took me a full 2 weeks to read this. There's probably several reasons for that. Overall, I enjoyed this. This is a book from the perspective of 3? Was it 3 or 4? 3 or 4 different perspectives. And there was a certain amount of trying to sort out quite what was going on and what was what part of the story. So I need to sit down and do a full review just of this book and gather my thoughts and make sure I've got my notes in order. So I will be back to talk about this in full, but I did enjoy it. I really did enjoy it. I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I would, but I'll be back to talk about this. So that took up 2 weeks in October. I just stayed pretty focused on this, short of dipping in and out of my Anais Nin essays. Yeah, that happens, right? These things happen. So I'll be back to talk about that. Okay, Victober. Let's get to the Victober books. The rest of them were just kind of October things going on. A little bit of bleed over from September. And so an impromptu buddy read, which is fabulous. I thought that was so fabulous. And I jumped on it. I just jumped on that, and I thought, well, let's be spontaneous here. This is fun. This is really fun. So Victober, what happened with Victober? Okay, there's a group read. Hello, Dee Dee from Brown Girl Reading. I might just drop you a message at some point in time, but hopefully you see my little hello here. I am reading this. There's a group of ladies reading Bleak House by Charles Dickens. They we're reading this in October and then November. I think the last live chat for this will be December 7th or something like that. I would like to get this finished by that time, but I am really behind where the rest of the group is at. So I have not, plus I just have not been able to participate in any lives. So I'm still participating kind of peripherally, but I am still reading this book, and I'm going to turn this around because that's what it should really look like. It's one of those penguin cloth bound editions where just some of the stuff rubs off, and I've been very, very careful. I'm not even sure that it started out very dark. You can't even hardly see the title up there. But anyway, this is a Victorian read, and I did get this started fairly early in October. I might have waited until after I finished Trust to get started. This is about 1,000 pages, and I'm right around the 200 page mark. So you can see it's a chunkster, and you can see where my little ribbon marker is. That's how far I am. I've read that much. So I need to start chapter 13. So Dickens can be a little slow to read, at least for me, probably for many people, a little bit slow to read. And something happened. I needed to adjust how I was reading this because, first of all, I took this with me on our little impromptu vacation thinking, oh, cool, I'll have time for this. Yeah, I read 5 pages out of this and I didn't read anything else. So it was not the right pick while you're on vacation. It just, it did not work for me. So it's not a reflection on the book. It's just sometimes place, timing, it matters. And so I started out reading this, and there is a Victorian England legal element to this book. And at the very beginning, there are a lot of footnotes, partly to address the fact that, us modern day, current now readers aren't really going to know about the legal ins and outs in the court systems in Victorian England, right? So there's a lot of footnotes. Now, I can be a little bit obsessive about those. Some of it obsessive. I don't know if that word came out right. I can be a little bit obsessive about reading all the footnotes. I want to get all of it. I want to learn. And, background as an academic, this is what you do. But sometimes that can interfere with your reading, right? For me, it pulls me out of the story, and it's like putting this down and opening up another book and reading out of it for a few lines. Oh, and then go back to this. It really messes me up to be bouncing around so much. And this copy, the footnotes are at the end, which is a good thing. It's also a not good thing, kind of for me, a bad thing. They would be very convenient if they were at the bottom of each page. But then I would more easily be sucked into reading all the footnotes, which would distract me from reading the book. It would take me out of the reading. So if I have to go to the back, it makes it a little easier for me to go, no, just Terri, let it go by that. You can come back and read those end notes later. Okay, let's just keep going. Let's finish this chapter at least. Okay, not get pulled out of what's going on in the story. So I did that for a while at first. Then what I did was I switched to my Kindle copy, which does not have footnotes. No footnotes on my copy of Bleak House on my Kindle. And it made it so much easier for me. There was no temptation to go, just better check on that. It just wasn't there. And I would read for several chapters, and then I would go back in my copy here and check all those footnotes that I didn't read. And if I needed to, I'd go back and put them in context to what I had read in the story. That really helped me to make some progress. Like I said, still 200 pages, but 200 pages is nothing to sneeze at. But when you're dealing with a 1,000-page book, you can see it's like, I have all that to go. So that really helped me out a lot. So that might be a tip for you if that is something that happens and distracts you and keeps you from making progress. And it might even, for some people, might even make them, just get frustrated and put the book down. And then if you have yourself on a time schedule because you're buddy reading or something like that, you could really get frustrated. So that's what I did. And I also am just not allowing myself to feel bad if I'm not keeping up. So I'm not keeping up. They're ahead of me in the group, which is fine. And I'm still enjoying it though. I really am. And I'm glad I'm reading it. This is one that was a shelf of shame. Why haven't I read this? Why have I not read this famous Dickens book? So I'm still working on that. And I fully anticipate needing to continue with it at least through this month and probably at least a little bit into December, maybe all of December. I don't know. I'm not going to pressure myself on that. Then I just decided, spur of the moment, I was going to join some other ladies there's a group read of The Beatitudes by Charles Spurgeon. And I thought, oh, how fun is that? Spurgeon is a Victorian preacher. And so that's generally the kind of, this is all about the Beatitudes from the Bible. That's the kind of thing you'll get with Charles Spurgeon. But I like reading him during Victober. And, because of the Victorian connection. And so I had good intentions. I will still be reading this book, but see that cute little bookmark? See my little mousey? Can you see what chapter I'm on? I haven't even started it. So I will be continuing. I'll be continuing with this. Not even continuing. I'll be starting this. And hopefully I'll be able to be reading this between now and the end of December. It's not long. And it just goes over each of the Beatitudes. So anyway, that happened or didn't happen. Is that a wrap? Then here's this one here, Hester by Margaret Oliphant. This was the group read for the official Victober group read. And I have heard so many good things. People who did join the group read and read it this last month loved it. They absolutely loved it. I've had this on my shelf for a little while, and I was kind of hoping maybe, but the reality, I think I even said it in my Victober TBR video, pretty sure I won't be doing it, but I wanted to talk about it in case there were other people out there who wanted to join that group read. So hopefully some of you did, and if you did, let me know in the comments. And did you enjoy it? So this is still, I might leave this sitting out for a while, where I can more easily keep it in the front of my mind as something to read. I do still want to read it, but the reality, I already knew, that's probably not going to happen. Then another one that I wanted to read and thought maybe I'd be able to read it. And this one is off of my shelf of shame. It's The Warden by Anthony Trollope. And you can see it's, for a Victorian, this is not that long. This is, how many pages? It's under 300 pages. So it's really not that long. And I don't think Trollope is difficult to read at all. This is part of his Barsetshire series, the Chronicles of Barsetshire, which I have wanted to start for a very long time. And I think I will enjoy Trollope. I've read a short bit of him, but maybe I should say a small bit. There was a chapter lifted out of one of his novels that has to do with Christmas, and I read that kind of as a short story. Really loved it, and I thought, oh, Trollope and I are probably going to get along. I think so. So this was out as a very hopeful read. I didn't get to it, but since I mentioned it, and I think this is one of the ones where I asked if anyone else was out there who might want to buddy read this, let me know, right? Because I figured I'm extending my Victober into November or December, maybe even January, February. For me, any of those months are good for me for Victorian reading. And so I did have someone indicate that they would like to buddy read this with me for the kind of December, January. And so hopefully that will happen. I'm looking forward to that. And I'll talk about that more when it happens. So, oh my gosh, I'm very excited about that. So this one is on the more imminent to be read and totally doable, totally doable. Then, okay, so that was the end of the Victorians there, that section that I wanted to talk about. Then there's these spooky reads that I like to do in October. And there's a challenge that I used to participate in, and I'm kind of I feel like I'm an emeritus participator. I don't usually participate officially, but when I read my spooky reads, I always just consider them RIP. This year is 20 years for the RIP challenge, and it stands for Readers Imbibing Peril. So I have 2 books that I read for that, and one of them is actually a short story, but it's in a larger collection. I did actually get to this. I was so happy. The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. So the book is The Legend of Sleepy Hollow and Other Stories by Washington Irving. And so I just read the title story, which was actually quite long as a short story. It was somewhere between 80 and 100 pages, I think, for the short story. I really did enjoy this, but I will tell you, I think I'm going to do a separate review of this story because I have some things to say. This Washington Irving is an American author from, what was he, 17, can I get to this quickly? 1783. He was born in New York City, 1783, and then I think he lived until 1875. So American literature for that period has a certain thing going on, and this one did. I fully expected a bit of a bone chiller, I guess. You know, the Headless Horseman, Sleepy Hollow, and they always put, you know, the covers are often, you know, kind of spooky looking. And so I read it for that purpose. It really did not spook me out. And so I will talk about that more in a separate review, but I did enjoy it. I really did enjoy it. But I had to adjust my thinking about it and my expectation because it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. Isn't that just the way it is sometimes? So I did read that. So that was a nice 80 to 100 pages for the RIP 20 challenge. Then Carl V. Anderson, he actually started the RIP Readers Imbibing Peril Challenge. I think he was the person who started it. He was the founder. Pretty sure about that. But anyway, I've been talking to him online for a long time. He's over on, I don't know if he does videos. I don't think so. Anyway, he's over on Instagram as Steel_droppings. It's a science fiction reference, I believe. Anyway, Your Guide to Not Getting Murdered in a Quaint English Village by Maureen Johnson and Jay Cooper. Carl V brought this to my attention recently. Not me personally, but he was talking about it. And I went out and got a copy, naked hardback, little book here that really is it's your guide to not getting murdered in a quaint English village. So for all of us who are, we like to watch those, cozy murder mysteries in quaint English villages. Those words don't go together, but it's a thing. And I'm thinking of, like Midsummer Murders. And it's like a murder every week. It's like, go figure, it's this little village. Why are all these people dying? What is dangerous? So how not to get murdered if you are in one of those. And here's an example. There's the locked room, and that's the text. And then there's the picture, the illustration by Jay Cooper that goes with it. The book is just full of stuff like that. I read it in one sitting. It was so much fun. It had a level of humor, especially if you watch those kinds of shows and you're familiar with that trope. And So I just found it so fun, so delightful, and this will just stay on my shelf, and I'll probably pull it out and once a year or once every other year and read it. So thank you, Carl V. If you do happen to be watching, I will come track you down and let you know on Instagram that I picked this up and enjoyed it thoroughly. So that was my two spooky reads that I read, and neither one of them was actually spooky. So, okay, so now let's move on from the it's a wrap or is it to let's just keep reading. And what do I think I want to do for November? Alrighty. November is known as Nonfiction November by many of us. That was started by Olive Fellows, and it has a life of its own. She kind of just released it in the last year and said, go. You know, it has a life of its own. So thank you, Olive, if you happen to see this, for starting that. And a lot of us, I mean, that's just what you do in November now, right? You read nonfiction. You focus on nonfiction. Even if that means just reading one, because you never read nonfiction. So anyway, fun times. So I'm going to be somewhat focused on nonfiction this month. We'll see how that goes. You know, we'll report back next month. So I will continue with my essays by Anais Nin. That totally fits that category. And I am almost finished with A Severe Mercy by Sheldon Van Auken. So that should be something that I can consider a nonfiction November read. And seriously, I'm 50 pages or less here in this book. Probably finish it in the next day or so. Then a nonfiction book that I wanted to read last year, and then I delayed, just reasons, but I did delay this. And I thought, oh, I've got to read it. I have to read it now. I am doing a reading project of Joan Didion's works and Eve Babbitt's works, books. And this came out last year, Didion and Babbitts by Lily Analick. And it's a biography of these two ladies. And I thought, oh, I must read this. I must read this. So I read some more. Did I read any Joan Didion this year? I'm further ahead with Didion than I was with Babbitts. But at this point, I've read quite a bit of Babbitts. There's not a lot, really. But I read a couple of Babbitt's books this year. So I think I'm ready to get into this and find out. There was a little bit of a rivalry. They were contemporary authors. So I'm very much looking forward to this. If you want to know more about it at this point, you can freeze that. Let's see here. And read that flap. Or just go look it up somewhere. But I'm really... yeah, I'm gonna start that. At least get this started. I'm gonna at least get this started this month. Needs to be read, I think, for my reading project as well as just Nonfiction November. And it's time. It's just time to read it. Then there are a couple of things that I hope to read. One more for not Victober, but for Nonfiction November. And it's called Land of Hope, An Invitation to the Great American Story by Wilfred M. McClay. So this is a history book. It can be used as a textbook. Probably, I'll have to look into this, but probably for maybe junior high, 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade maybe. And I love the title. I have read other books that are used as textbooks on American history. And I wanted something that was going to be a little bit different, maybe in its focus, maybe a little bit different in its hopefulness. And I don't want lies. I don't want, we're going to make it hopeful. But I like this idea of, there's always hope. There's always hope. And so, I kind of get an urge to read American history type stuff this time of year as well. So I would like to at least get this started. It's going to be a lot, and it's you know, since it's a textbook, it has an index in the back. It's got a bibliography in the back. So you can look at people, places, events, things like that throughout American history. But what I want to do is, and there are maps and there are photographs that are related throughout. But what I want to read to you, I'm going to read to you out of the front here, because there was a very interesting bit by John Dos Passos. I'm going to hold it up before I read it to you, so if you want to freeze that and actually read it yourself, you can. But this is by John Dos Passos. It's just in the front of this book. And it is from a book called The Ground We Stand On, Some Examples from the History of a Political Creed. And this is the section, chapter, maybe, The Use of the Past. So that's what this comes from. And it was published in 1941. So I'm going to hold this up for a moment and let you have a chance if you want. But I am going to read this. I think it's worth reading for a couple of reasons. Every generation rewrites the past. In easy times, history is more or less of an ornamental art. But in times of danger, we are driven to the written record by a pressing need to find answers to the riddles of today. We need to know what kind of firm ground other men, belonging to generations before us, have found to stand on. In spite of changing conditions of life, they were not very different from ourselves. Their thoughts were the grandfathers of our thoughts. They managed to meet situations as difficult as those we have to face, to meet them sometimes lightheartedly, and in some measure to make their hopes prevail. We need to know how they did it. In times of change and danger, when there is a quicksand of fear under men's reasoning, a sense of continuity with generations gone before can stretch like a lifeline across the scary present and get us past that idiot delusion of the exceptional now that blocks good thinking. That is why, in times like ours, when old institutions are caving in and being replaced by new institutions not necessarily in accord with most men's preconceived hopes, political thought has to look backwards as well as forwards. That was, I don't know exactly when in 1941 that was written, but that's when the United States became involved in World War II. This is my grandparents' generation. They were young adults in their 20s in 1941. And I thought, wow, 1941, well, that could have just been written for today, which is why I'm sure it's in the front of this book, Land of Hope. So I at least want to get started with this. It's been on my shelf for a couple of years. The copyright is 29, there's two copyrights, 2019 and 2020. So I got this probably in 2020 would be my guess. And I didn't dive into it, but I think I want to get started with this and just get this perspective, okay, on American history. And just, I'll report back to you. I'll report back to you on this. So I'm very much looking forward to reading out of this. Then, okay, hello, Britta. This book. This is, I pronounce it Quixote, The Female Quixote by Charlotte Lennox. This is 18th century literature. I think that some people call it the female Quixote. I do know that you don't say Quixote, even though there is a connection with Don Quixote. My professor said Quixote, so that's what I always say. I just call it Quixote, but I've heard Quixote as well. So I'll be saying Quixote, and you'll have to just interpret that in your own head if you pronounce it otherwise. Anyway, Britta and I were going to be doing this as a buddy read. She wanted to get started in, we have planned this for a while, and it kept getting delayed. And I don't know, hopefully it was also partly on her part, delaying it, and not just me, but I want to read it because I read Don Quixote earlier this year, and so I would like to read this. 18th century literature, so the 1700s, is not my thing. It is not my cup of tea. Though this might be. I might enjoy this very much. And so it's I've kind of had a bit of a block. I want to read it and I don't want to read it. Does that make sense? And so, Britta, I think you'll have to let me know if you did start this in October. And then I thought, well, I might jump in November. I hope I do. But we kind of have this agreement at this point because I don't want to delay her if she wants to read this. Well, I keep futzing about and going, I don't know if I'm really ready to read that. I'm not feeling it. You know what I'm saying? She's very tolerant of me. Thank you, Britta. But anyway, so what we decided was, maybe we'll be kind of concurrently reading, but we'll talk about it when we both finished it. So there you go. It's still sitting out, and I do still plan on reading it. I keep finding other things that are calling to me. So it will happen at some point. And then this is completely and utterly hopeful thinking, and I'm pretty sure this will not get read. But let me know if you've read it. It's called The Shooting Party by Isabel Colgate. This is a Modern Classics, is my copy. And at a quick glance here, I couldn't figure out exactly when it was written. My impression is that it was written maybe in the 1950s, but I'm not sure about that. The verso page wasn't being immediately helpful to me. So anyway, The Shooting Party. So we're talking about England, and we're talking, I think, Edwardian England, and the upper class, they have shooting parties. I think they usually happen in the fall, in the autumn. And so I've had it on my shelf for a little while. It's not really a shelf of shame. It's not in that territory at this point. But I would like to read it. And it is that time of year. And I like seasonal reads, but I'm pretty sure I won't get to it. It's not really that long. But listen to this. This is just fabulous. Let's see here. It is autumn 1913, and a brilliant array of guests has gathered at Sir Randolph Nettleby's Oxfordshire estate for a shooting party. Opulent, adulterous, oh my gosh, okay, of course, moving assuredly through the rituals of eating and slaughter. Sorry, guys. They represent a dazzlingly opaque and wonderfully decorative finale of an era, that of the privileged in Edwardian England. But as war approaches, the group find their social peace is shattered, and change and violence invade their lives. I think it's a bit of, there's romance, social commentary, country lore, intrigue both above and below stairs. So the upstairs, downstairs thing. That just sounded like so much fun. And here's the author, Isabel Colgate. Have you read this? What did you think? Tell me in the comments below. But I'm sure this is totally hopeful thinking on my part, but who knows? Sometimes I just ditch everything and just be in my bonnet. I'm reading this now. So I'll be reporting back to you next month on how all of this went. So anyway, there's my It's a Wrap or Is It, and my November possible maybe TBR reading, and not a lot of content about the actual books themselves. So I hope you had fun anyway. I had fun doing this. So leave me comments. If you don't have anything to say, leave me some autumn themed emojis, some autumn leaves or whatever speaks to you of autumn, a steaming cup of tea or coffee, whatever, just say hi, through an emoji if you want to. I enjoy that very much. You're just letting me know you were there. So anyway, I will talk to you all later, book friends. Happy November. Bye-bye.